Incredible statements from Fritz about Alcaraz that change everything before the final. A tireless worker, a man who has crashed into the same wall several times, but who perseveres in his attempt to break through his glass ceiling. Taylor Fritz is a true example of professionalism and determination applied to tennis, and he wants to explore his limits. Present at the ATP 500 Tokyo 2025, he spoke about what it meant for him to defeat Carlos Alcaraz in San Francisco. Confidence is an abstract feeling that is difficult to explain and quantify, especially in tennis. Many matches end up being decided by that intangible factor that appears in players' minds and greatly conditions their performance in key moments. Believing in oneself allows playing with aplomb, with competitive ferocity and security in what one does, something Taylor Fritz has sometimes lacked against the very best. The American believes that could change after having beaten Carlos Alcaraz, as he commented to Olympics, during the ATP 500 Tokyo 2025. For some time now, I've seen myself as capable of beating the best if my tennis works perfectly. Having beaten Carlos and Sasha consecutively at the Laver Cup gives me an extra boost of confidence. It makes me see that I can achieve it. Obviously, those wins didn't happen in a tournament as important as a Grand Slam, but I felt nerves and pressure, and I managed them. Mentally, it's key for me to face a challenge with the calm awareness of having done it before. It makes it easier for me, said a man who, for example, has never been able to beat Djokovic. Already a Grand Slam finalist, as he was last year in New York, Fritz has consolidated himself in the top 10 with sublime consistency and has long been one of the firmest alternatives to the established powers. My main goal is to win a Grand Slam. I know I can beat the best, but to place myself at their level regularly I need a great success that makes me see that I am at their level. After Djokovic, both Zverev and I are trying to reach the level of Sinner and Alcaraz, explained the Californian. There are very few players who can compete head-to-head with them, even on an isolated day, and I'm working very hard to shorten the distance that separates me from them. Only if I'm able to win a Grand Slam title can I think about other goals, like fighting to be the best in the world, warned Taylor Fritz, who has left behind physical problems that hampered his performance at the start of the season, now facing these last months of competition brimming with confidence. Champion of 2 titles so far this season, settled in the top 5 and close to securing his presence at the ATP Finals 2025, he has some exciting months ahead, starting with this ATP 500 Tokyo 2025, where he is already in the semifinals and could have to face Carlos Alcaraz again in the final. It was a big problem getting injured after the Australian Open because I developed bad habits by playing in pain. I stopped, I played poorly on clay, but everything changed on the grass swing. Since then, I see myself playing at a great level, concluded the American. Carlos Alcaraz reveals his desire for revenge against Fritz before the Tokyo final. Carlos Alcaraz expressed his motivation and eagerness for that ATP 500 Tokyo final against Taylor Fritz. The Mercian tennis player expressed his desire for revenge after the American became his executioner during the last Laver Cup. "We're going to try to change some things," said the world number 1. With the 10th final of the year under his belt, Carlos Alcaraz is already preparing for the challenge of Taylor Fritz. The American, whom the Mercian had always been able to beat, has become the Spaniard's big challenge after what happened at the Laver Cup. Fritz found the trick against Alcaraz, and the world number 1 has already warned before the match that he is motivated by the challenge of playing him. "I know he's been playing great tennis lately. At the Laver Cup, against me, against Zverev, also in this tournament. He's feeling great, very comfortable on court. We're going to try to change some things," began Carlos Alcaraz about the adjustments he wants to make to defeat Fritz. "I'm going to try to take the good things I did today and the good things I did in the Laver and change the bad. It's going to be a very interesting match that I'm delighted to play," explained the Mercian about those changes he intends to make after what happened at the Laver Cup. Alcaraz breaks his ceiling. This is already the season with the most wins of his career. Carlos Alcaraz continues to defy his limits and break barriers in a 2025 that is proving to be the best year of his career. Not only for having won Roland Garros and the US Open, regained the number 1 ranking and collected 7 titles, but also because it has already become the season with the most wins of his young career. After defeating Casper Ruud in the semifinals of the ATP Tokyo, he notched his 66th victory, thus surpassing the 65 of 2023. His other seasons in the elite added up to 54 in 2024, 57 in 2022, and 32 in 2021. Ferrero reveals the aspect he works on most with Carlos Alcaraz to help him improve. Carlos Alcaraz took a brief rest after winning the ATP 500 Rotterdam, the first indoor title of his career. The Mercian tennis player removed the bitter taste left by his elimination in the quarterfinals of the Australian Open, at the hands of a hurt Novak Djokovic. Winning in Melbourne was one of Carlos's goals for the year, since it is the only Grand Slam missing from his record, although he is still very young and has plenty of room for improvement. His team is constantly working on the improvement of a player who, with barely 4 seasons, already has a better resume than all active players, except Djokovic, of course. At 21 years old, you always have room for improvement. Carlos is a super talented player but still has many things to improve on, obviously the mental side and consistency in matches. He has a lot to improve in that regard. And that's the good thing, we have very clear motivations and objectives, and he is aware of them, said Juan Carlos Ferrero, the Spaniards' coach, on Radio Marca. Juanqui was not in Rotterdam, as he was resting, and was successfully replaced by Samuel Lopez, who has now become a more active part of the team. This is how Alcaraz prepares to be more consistent. The consistency Ferrero refers to is not just putting a lot of balls over the net, it's not just rhythm, it's about trying to minimize the ups and downs that Alcaraz sometimes has within matches, in which he falls into slumps with several consecutive errors. The way they have worked on this was already explained in this newspaper by Antonio Martinez Cascales, director of the Ferrero Tennis Academy. In sets or practice matches they impose conditions. For example, if he wins 3 points in a row, they give him 1 for free. But, on the other hand, if he is 15-0 and doesn't win the next point, they take 1 away, so instead of 15-15 the score is 0-15. The conditions of competition can't be replicated, but to string points together in tournaments you first have to do it in training. Technically, the serve is the stroke Alcaraz works on the most and where he has the most room for improvement. Sinner is inspiration. In the same interview on Radio Marca, Juan Carlos Ferrero admitted that Jannik Sinner's presence and improvement are, deep down, an extra motivation for Alcaraz. Sinner is a very complete player, he's been very aware of what he needed to improve in recent years and has managed to do so. He has a very experienced team around him that helps him a lot. He's matured over the last year and is very aware of what he feels within the match and what he needs to feel to win. He's going to be a very tough rival and will demand a lot from Carlos so that he doesn't relax and keeps improving, said Juanqui. Jannik himself has sometimes reflected in the same way, that Alcaraz's presence is one more reason to improve. The reunion between Alcaraz and Sinner will be in Doha. They could only meet in a hypothetical final, since they are the main seeds, as Alexander Zverev chose this season to play the claycourt swing in South America. Nowadays, everyone knows Carlos Alcaraz. At 22 years old, the Spaniard, recent world number 1 after winning another US Open, has already become one of the most successful tennis players in history. His 23 titles on court, 6 of them Grand Slams, and the more than $50 million he has accumulated in prize money attest to this. And all this in just 5.5 years, since his debut on the circuit after making his first appearance at the Rio Open. At that moment, Alcaraz was only 16 years old. A year earlier was when he met the man who is still his coach today, Juan Carlos Ferrero, who took a gamble by betting on the young tennis player. At that time, the former world number 1 and Roland Garros champion was Alexander Zverev's coach, when the German was already 3rd or 4th in the world. He was well positioned within the tennis world, yet he decided to bet everything on a 15-year-old Mercian. At the beginning, there were many coaches and many people who, when I took Carlos, told me, "Where are you going? You've been number 1 in the world. How are you going to travel around with a kid from here to there by car?" I thought it through carefully. For me it was a personal and professional growth bet as a coach, to work with a kid from a young age and prepare him well, Ferrero admitted in a past interview with Cadena Ser. He was the same person who already sensed the potential Carlos Alcaraz could have when he first saw him at just 12 years old at the Ferrero Tennis Academy, located in Vienna, Alicante, created and directed by Ferrero himself after reaching world number 1 back in September 2003. An academy that has also been home to players such as Pablo Carreño, Mario Vilella, Carlos Jimeno, or Eva Guerrero. I saw him for the first time when he was 12 or 13 years old. He came to the academy and we trained one day. He was very small but you could tell everyone was talking about him. He had everything he is now, but in small scale, he confessed. He was a string bean, he had speed, but he had no muscles, though we did see something very special, he pointed out. At 14 years old and without a physique he competed with very tough rivals for him, something that always amazed Ferrero, who knew the hardest part was yet to come in the following years.